Hello. So today I am gonna do my best to make a video talking about a very, very touchy subject for a lot of people. Me too, as well. Um, I took notes, so if you see me looking down, I'm just checking in on my notes to make sure, because I'm likely to go off on a tangent or lose my train of thought. I'm ADD as can be. I guess disclaimers for YouTube. I am I'll do my best not to, but likely to use profanity. Just it's been who I've been since I was a kid. I cuss. Okay. Um, these videos that I'm going to make and I'm going to continue to make is I'm doing it because I've been soul searching for some time, and I would say on my journey of who am I and what is it that's going to make me happy in this life. And as I've been going through all this and dealing with all this, it's making me realize there's got to be so many other people in this world, especially because scenarios and situations from I run into friends and people, even strangers, and it's like they'll bring up a conversation or talk to me about something, and I realize that so many people in the world are experiencing the same thing or something very similar. So I decided to start talking about it and sharing my experiences, my pain, my suffering, my good, my bad, my ugly, whatever you want to call it, in hopes that it's going to help somebody else. So, please be sure to be open minded and hear my thoughts all the way through, because I don't fit in the box. I don't even know if I'm even close somewhere outside around the box, because I just have always been outside the box. It's who I am. It's the way I think. It's the way I function. And I'm not going to apologize for it to nobody. So, to get my message clear or to fully follow what I'm saying, you definitely need to listen all the way through, because it's definitely going to be a different perspective. My perspective, my opinion, of course, my thoughts, my feelings, or whatever. But like I said, I'm doing it because I do believe it will help some other people in this world. So if you like my content, what I have to say, and you want to hear more, please make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, put on the notification, share it, all that boo-bah, whatever jabs that you do with a YouTube channel. I'm new to this, and just going with the flow. I ain't doing nothing technical, fancy, whatever. I kept thinking like, oh, I got to do my hair. Oh, I got to do my makeup, blah, 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 blah. And then I'm like, no, I don't. Why do I? If I'm going to get in the car and go to my daughter's school and pick her up from school looking like this, I could look like this for anybody else in the world. I suffer from a bunch of autoimmune diseases where I'm chronically, sick or dealing with, pain every day of my life and so forth. Um, you know, Today ain't the greatest of days, but I just been dragging this out too long to get this information out, because it's been the topic we're going to talk about today has been chasing me for quite some time, since prior to the last election, and it just keeps coming up. It keeps haunting me, and every time it comes up, I feel frustration because of the angles, the views, the perspectives, and actions that are trying to be taken towards these subjects. I feel, my opinion, they're just all looking at it, you know, not for what it is, or maybe not the whole bigger picture. They're just looking at a piece of it. So I'm going to try to bring light to it in a bigger picture form without dragging it out too long. So sorry if, I already done wrote you a book. I see over 4 minutes just with an introduction. So anyway, let me get to it. So, like I was saying, we're going into the election. So right now, there is a lot of people in the world that are out there trying to address racism, injustice to minorities and stuff like that, prejudice. yada yada. I don't have to go any further. You get it. You know what I'm talking about. Which I absolutely respect them and appreciate them for their efforts, because nothing is happening or going to change just by one person, two person, three person, whatever. It's everything's in numbers, obviously. But you know, we got to be careful with that, because the masses, you know, can't follow all the masses, because sometimes the M is missing and you're following the. But anyhow, so let me get to it. Okay, so I feel that the answers, the change, the changes that we're seeking in this world will never come from the sources that are being approached or addressed to try and make these changes. I just feel like it's never coming from there. And I'm going to refer in this video to, you know, white people, black people, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, etc., whatever. All minorities, in my opinion. Any nationality that is not considered white or Caucasian, to me, is a, you know, white Caucasian is, in the U.S., to me, a minority. So, when you hear me refer to minorities, that's Italians, Mexicans, Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, blacks, Haitians, whatever. Anybody that's not white. Okay, so that's just so that you guys, for the purposes that you can understand, because as I said, everybody in my book's a minority. Okay, so here is, in my opinion, the two main problems this world needs to adjust and address to, you know, make changes in the world we live in. I'm talking about real changes, changes that are going to, you know, stick, stand, stay. You know, we are well over 150 years past slavery ending, and we're still having conversations about racism. It's actual, total, straight up insanity to me. Did you hear that? 150 years beyond it. And we're still talking about it? We're still addressing issues with that? Okay. So here's my two main reasons. Number one, I'm not gonna call it racism. I'm gonna call it prejudice. And I'll explain, or by the end of my video, you'll understand why I call it prejudice. And number two is victimization. So prejudice and victimization are our two main driving forces that have allowed this world and the people that live in it currently. And, you know, if something doesn't change, also every generation to come after, unless some major changes happen, to become heartless, selfish, and entitled. There's not a white man in this world now, nor will there ever be a white man that can or will fix a minority's problems. Did you hear that? There's not a white man in this world now, nor will there ever be one white man in this world that can or will fix a minority's problems. Let me tell you why. As minorities, like I said earlier, for over the last 150 years since slavery has ended, we have refused to support our own growth. Pause. What? Rewind. What did I just say? As minorities, we have refused to support our own growth. So, for this video, I'm just going to give you one example. Just one. Later on down the road, I will make another video. I'll give you At least 10 examples, minimum, bare minimum. So, what's my example? You're looking at it. I am the example. Who am I? What am I? I'm sure some of you are already thinking, who the fuck she thinks she is? Bringing up slavery, talking about slavery, prejudice, etc., on and on and on. I already know. All the responses and thoughts and things going through your heads. Why? Because I have lived them my entire life. So, my mother was said to be black and 3 types of American Indian. That's what I was told as a child, what my mother was. My father I was told he was Puerto Rican. Grandmother, full Puerto Rican, like right from Puerto Rico, da 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 da. Grandfather also, but had a smidgen of American Indian in him. Okay? So either way, my father's side of the family fully embraced Puerto Rican, being Puerto Rican, Latin descent. Okay? So, around the time I was about somewhere between 8 or 10, was visiting one of my mom's sisters, and she was going through college at that time, and I remember her bringing up a conversation to my mom, and I think there were some other family members there or whatever, maybe another sister or so, and she's going through, all this about how, for college, she did a family tree, and how she found, and traced it back to where there was, white in the family, and it was, from driven, like more so from a French descent or whatever the case may be, and just, really pumping on this French stuff or whatever. And, by that point in my life, being somewhere between like 8 and 10 years old, I already had very, very strong feelings when it came to, I guess, race, color, whatever you want to call it, because my mom is one of 10, okay? And through the 10 of them, there is a range of complexions where they range from a very, very, fair-skinned, to a, complexion that fully and completely would belong to, an African American or a black person, okay? So, even my mother, she is definitely quite a few shades lighter than me. Very, yellow, I don't know, pale complexion, whatever you want to call it. So, with that, in her, the 10 of them, it was like some of them, claimed to be black. Some of them, wanted, the lighter ones to try to be white, and some of them, wanted, to just be whoever you thought they were, like whatever. Me, that was always my take, like, whatever, I am what I am. There was a time when I was a kid when I, and I'll get into that more in a minute, but let me go back to this before I get sidetracked. So, again, back to that conversation, and she's going in and expressing how she found this French and da 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 da, and, all I can remember, I can remember thinking so clearly, God, this thought is so clear in my head, is like, damn, you want to be white that damn bad that you're making that shit up. That you went through the extent to add all this and whatever you went and did to drum this French into our family tree. Right? It's all that went through my head because she was one of the ones that wanted to be white, which I felt some type of way about. Because as far as I knew, that we definitely were not white, Not that I had any issues with white people, not that either of my parents, brought up anything about white people or did played the constant, card of, being treated like a minority or anything. No, none of that. I grew up in a development, and the development had everything there. Whites, blacks, Puerto Ricans, whatever. So I grew up not knowing color. And so the only introduction I had to, color and prejudice was from, my mom's side of the family. And so by the time I realized that it existed there, and, I was old enough to have already drawn a conclusion that what does it matter what you are? You're still a person. You're still here. You're still breathing. You can still do whatever it is that you want to do in your life. You control that, not your skin color or nationality or race or any of that. Like, you control who you are. You can be anything you want to be. And we know this because there's black people that it's like, wow, you sound white, you talk white. There's white people that sound black, talk black. Like, just any way you want to look at it. It's like you are and will be who you want to be. It's not driven by your complexion or what's written on your birth certificate or anywhere in between. So, and I definitely really want to dig into that because of the fact that, you know, as a kid, anytime if the opportunity or presented or the conversation came up about if I was black and I brought up that I was black, especially to other black, kids or whatever, because we were all kids or whatever, I was always told, you're not black. And I'm like, why ain't I black? Oh, you look at your hair. You have nice long hair, this, that, da 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 da. And I'm like, okay, what's that supposed to mean? That was always my feeling. Like, why does my hair make me not black? Just was always my thinking. So, not for all blacks, but for the majorities of black people that I have crossed paths with in my, younger years. If I expressed, that I was black, and obviously because at that time it wasn't so mixed as it is now, I was met with, confrontation. No, you're not, and not accepted. Okay. And then when it came to Puerto Ricans and Latin descent, my grandmother from my father's side, she raised 5 boys on her own. And she didn't want, and it's crazy because I'll touch back and I'll get into this in later stories, but my grandmother on my mother's side did everything she could to fight prejudice too. So I could cannot understand how some of her own children put in so much effort to demolish her life's efforts of trying to put an end to people being judgmental and prejudiced based off the color of your skin. Because my grandmother on my mother's side was very, very, very fair-skinned. She could have passed for white. She had long, beautiful hair, so she could have passed for white at any time that she ever wanted to, but she never went that route. She married a black man with a black man's complexion, and, I'm sure some of my family members, the ones that want to be whatever they want to be, are going to probably object and say, oh, my grandfather wasn't dark or this and that, but he had a black man's complexion. I don't care what they say, okay? So my grandmother was the one that was white, very pale. So that's where we got the, rainbow of colors there. But anyway, back to my grandmother from my father's side, she wanted to, raise them in a way where they wouldn't be judged. So she broke, I would say, the cycle of what all old school Puerto Ricans do. For those of you who have dealt with or know Puerto Rican families, the grandparents, and if you lived around or got to meet great grandparents, most of them, the majority of them, all only spoke Spanish. And especially in the household at home, they only spoke Spanish. So like you weren't gonna, be in their house and hear them speak in English. It just didn't happen. Well, my grandmother chose to do the opposite and speak predominantly English in her household, because she did not want her boys to have an accent, or anything that will give someone the opportunity to judge them. So if they called looking for a job or to acquire it by anything, she didn't want anyone to be able to identify or distinguish them through the way they sounded, even just over the phone. Because she figured, yes, they could still judge once in person, but at that point, it would be in their hands to, make their life what it's going to be and take charge or control of the situation. And, it would be a matter of, did they actually have the qualifications for that job or whatever it may be, as opposed to if they didn't get the job, just looking at it as, oh, well, they didn't give it to me because I was a Puerto Rican, which minorities do a lot. All minorities. If they don't get a job or this and that, they automatically fall back to, oh, because I wasn't white. No. A lot of times it's because you're not qualified. And because you leave there saying it was because you weren't white, and you convince yourself of that, or even if you don't leave there thinking that, you go home and you let a toxic family member with toxic generational curses and bullshit convince you that it was because of the color of your skin. Don't get me wrong, does happen, but nowhere near as much as people make it to be. That's that victimization I'm talking about. So it's like, she didn't want any of that, because like I said, there's so many minorities that are leaving with that thought. So because they left with the thought that it was because of the color of their skin, they never looked at the real issue at hand. And the real issue at hand was that they needed more qualifications, more skills, in order to, get that job and progress in life. And because they never seen that side of the coin or that part of the picture, they never expanded on that. They never grew beyond that. So they will continue to face that same result again and again and again. And so just back to me and who I am. So I'm back to, like I said, what my grandmother did. She did not speak, because I went off on a tangent. Sorry. She did not speak Spanish in her home. So by the time it got down to us, my father chose to not teach us Spanish because he felt that he was not fluent. He felt it was broken, which, hey, don't get me wrong. I've had plenty of people tell me as an adult that, yeah, he speaks some jacked up Spanish. But hey, as I've told him as an adult, I would have took broken over nothing. But hey, water under the bridge. We can't go back, right? So when it came to Puerto Ricans now, and they would start to speak to me in Spanish, and I would tell them I don't speak Spanish, and I carried the last name Torres, they immediately would go off into a tangent in Spanish. Sometimes they cuss. I knew the cusses. I don't remember anymore, but I knew the cusses. But they would just go off on a rant of basically, oh, she thinks she's better than us. She doesn't want to speak our language. They had all these thoughts as to why I was saying I didn't speak Spanish, because they absolutely refused to believe that I didn't speak Spanish. Remind you that most of my working years, I've worked in retail sales. So if I'm trying to sell you something, clearly I would need you to be in your comfort zone. So if your comfort zone was speaking Spanish, I'd be speaking Spanish. I wouldn't want to irritate you, piss you off, and give you lies that I don't speak Spanish if I could. But again, this has gone on from the time I was a child all the way to young adult until I married and got rid of the name. And hey, even getting rid of the name didn't fix it. Still dealt with it. So guess what that means? Puerto Ricans didn't accept me either. Okay? So then I did have a brief point in my life where I went and stayed with one of my mother's sisters who heavily followed Native American background. So while I was there, she had me run for the title of Miss Indian Arkansas, which I did, and I won. So I spent like that whole year, like every weekend somewhere in full Native American regalia, which is their clothing, their dress, moccasins, sleeping in a teepee. Thinking now that was wild. There's wild coyotes and all that out there, and here we are out there. But hey, whatever. Attending powwows, dancing, doing everything, and while attending those events, there was many occasions where adults, you know, are you full Native American or whatever, one incident I will never forget is little white boy walked up to me. His parents are right there. Had my hair in the two, Pocahontas braids or whatever. And my hair was very long, so he reaches up and he grabs the end of my braid and he like gives it a yank and he says, "Are you a real Indian?" And it took all I had to contain my knee-jerk reaction, which was like to just smack the shit out of that little boy for even touching me. But I kept myself together, hold my composure, and I just kind of looked at the parents to see, like, you gonna say anything to him? Nope, they didn't say shit. They just let him go. And like in my head, I'm thinking to myself, "You a real little white boy? Like, what the fuck? Like, who does that? What is that?" So we've spoke about blacks. I'm not dark enough. My hair's not nappy enough. It's too long. Puerto Ricans. I don't speak Spanish. Interestingly enough, I found out in the last couple years, I've always known I had a very rare blood type. But because of my health issues and not getting answers, I've been trying to research everything to overturn every rock possible to try to get answers or, look for possibilities or whatever. And I always knew I had a really rare blood type, but as I researched it pretty heavily, it predominantly is heavily within white people, Caucasians. And I'm talking about Caucasians with a very pale skin is its origin. And so I had to just chuckle and to myself because I'm like, oh, okay, so I have white people blood. Well, I ain't even gonna bother to try to entertain that thought because I know that's not gonna be go over too well, especially when that one's so much more invisible, on the surface compared to all the rest of them. Those are just a couple quick short examples from each different race. I did my ancestry DNA I think back in 2017, and all the little circles and the colors and the regions and everything, 15 plus different areas or whatever. So it's like my DNA is spread all over this freaking world and all different groups and nationalities and all of this. It's very interesting. To me, it just leads back to, what I've always believed is like, you're not any different than me. You're not any better than me. Your DNA, your coding just gave you a different complexion, hair type, whatever. Obviously, we have to be pretty much all within the same to an extent because of the fact that we can interbreed and everything else. If you ever did research into DNA, you'll find out that it's only like 0.01 difference from any race to another. So, to sum it all up, I had more that I wanted to talk about because that was just more of the prejudice side. I didn't even get into the victimization side, but I'm already at about a half hour, so I'm gonna end this one here and do a part 2 for the victimization. And I'm gonna leave it at this thought. in my opinion, whites, blacks, minorities, whatever, you know, why I say the minorities don't allow our growth and we are our own worst enemies is tell a Jamaican he's a Haitian. Tell a black person he's a Jamaican or a Haitian. Tell a Puerto Rican he's a Dominican, or a Dominican he's a Puerto Rican, or a Cuban he's a Puerto Rican or a Dominican, or you know, a Mexican, or call a Mexican a Puerto Rican, or call an Italian a Puerto Rican, or vice versa. Just go through all the different minority groups and look how much prejudice they put on to the next minority group. There's more prejudice and racism within minorities than there is within white people at this day and age. What happened 150 plus years ago is not the problem here today. The problem here today is so much bigger than that because the racism is within minorities. Minorities won't even support other minority businesses. That's a huge problem. Not supporting our own growth. If you don't support other minorities in any shape, form, or fashion, they're going to continue to live with that victimization mentality and not continue to grow and flourish to be able to obtain the positions needed and status needed to finally put an end to all this. So the last thought is that I am, based off my DNA, based off my experiences of this life, I am part of all, but I'm accepted by none. So think about that. Part of all minorities, but accepted by none. Catch me for part 2, victimization.